Peter Lorre is one of the most recognizable figures in horror history. With his soft voice, bulging eyes, lisp, and round face, he became the embodiment of the sinister and the creepy in Hollywood. However, beneath his unusual appearance lay a complex individual who faced many hardships, including fleeing real-life horrors multiple times. He was both a famous movie star and a homeless refugee, a bon vivant and a prankster, yet many believed he was a murderer. Behind his humor, he was a deeply troubled man whose life ended tragically and too soon due to his inner demons. This is the haunting story of Peter Lorre, the Lost One. Peter Lorre was born Laszlo Lowenstein on June 26, 1904, as the eldest child of Alajos Lowenstein and Elvira Freischberger. The family lived in Rosa Hegi, known to local German speakers as Rosenberg, which was then part of Lipto County in the Kingdom of Hungary and is now Ružomberok, Slovakia. His parents, German-speaking Jews, moved to Rosa Hegi after Alajos secured a job as chief bookkeeper at a textile mill. He also served as a lieutenant in the Austrian Army Reserve, which often took him away for training. Shortly after Peter's birth, Alajos left for a month of drills. 2 years later, the family welcomed a second son, Fent, in April 1908. Tragically, Elvira died shortly after giving birth to a third son, Andra. The cause of her death remains unclear. Some believe it was blood poisoning, others suggest food poisoning, and some suspect murder. The official death certificate cited blood poisoning, but speculation that food poisoning, potentially caused by human interference, lingers. Soon after, Alajos remarried Melanie Klein, who had been Elvira's best friend. They had 2 more children together, but Peter's relationship with his stepmother was extremely strained. She treated him harshly, and he often hid under the bed to escape her explosive temper and physical abuse. Elvira's sudden death also raised suspicions, as she appeared to be in good health before her passing. Although there was no concrete evidence, some believed Melanie Klein might have poisoned her. The mysterious circumstances fueled rumors that Melanie had motives for Elvira's death, and these suspicions persisted for years. In 1913, as the Second Balkan War began, Alajos feared a larger conflict was imminent and moved the family to Vienna, where he was soon drafted. During the harsh winter of 1914-1915, Alajos served on the Eastern Front against Russian forces, and later worked in a prison camp due to heart problems. After his service, Alajos acquired a 3,000-acre property along the Sava River in Carinthia, a picturesque region of Austria with mountains and extensive forests, but very few residents. He turned to agriculture and began fulfilling timber orders for the army. However, by May 1917, life became increasingly difficult, prompting the family to return to inner-city Vienna, where they struggled with ration cards that allowed only small portions of meat. They relied heavily on their countryside estate for basic food needs. For Peter and his brothers, time spent at the Krai estate was a rare bright spot in their youth. To earn extra money, they harvested hay, cared for cows, picked apples from the orchard, and pressed them for wine. Alajos also taught his sons to ride horses. In September 1918, Peter finished his studies with good grades, allowing him to advance to the second year of a 4-year business program at the Handelsakademie Academy. Given his later struggles with finances, which he attributed to a lack of attention to detail, it is surprising that he excelled in business mathematics, bookkeeping, business law, and economic policy. This discrepancy may have been particularly frustrating for his future creditors. Perhaps Peter kept his academic success to himself later in life due to this disconnect. Peter completed his final exam on June 28, 1921, and graduated at the top of his class the following week. Despite this achievement, he felt drawn to leave the business world behind to pursue acting. He once described his passion for acting as an addiction, likening it to a disease from an unknown source, which he believed was rooted in the restrictive environment of a Viennese business school in the early 1920s. while he later discussed the psychology of acting in depth. He had little to say about his early experiences in the field. He remembered living in a fantasy world where he unconsciously acted out various roles. His brother Fent recalled their debut as dwarfs in a school production of Snow White, saying, "I was the smallest, and Peter was the biggest. We just had to hop around on stage without speaking." Although Lorre did not consider this debut significant for his future roles, he did not act again until his mid-school years when his German teacher suggested him for 3 one-act plays being cast for a theater evening. Later, Lorre downplayed the importance of his early acting experiences, stating, "You either make faces or are born to do it, or you don't like it, and that's all there is to it." In 1935, he reflected that becoming an actor was not a conscious decision. "I did not tell myself I was going to be an actor because I didn't really understand what that meant. Yet deep down, something stirred within me, pushing me forward. I knew then why I had left my father's house." He had left home and found himself living in poverty in a city struggling after its defeat in the war. A city that was home to influential figures like Sigmund Freud, Adolf Hitler, and Ludwig Wittgenstein. During this time, the Viennese theater scene was radical and attracted a diverse group of outsiders, agitators, and talented actors. The political atmosphere was tense and sometimes violent. For Lorre, acting became an obsession, revealing a darker side of his personality. His intense passion for theater took a toll on his health. "For a long time I was hungry, friendless, and cold," he shared in a 1935 interview. "I knew park benches as beds and the feeling of pressing my face against the window of a sweet shop." Despite his poor diet, he remained surprisingly plump, even as his health deteriorated. "I believe I am the only actor who actually had scurvy," he said, admitting to having resorted to theft to satisfy his hunger. This inadequate diet eventually led to severe gallbladder problems that required surgery. His first operation did not go well, and he was prescribed morphine for pain management, leading to a lifelong addiction. Tired of Vienna, he moved to Breslau and then to Zurich. By the late 1920s, he arrived in Berlin, where he worked with Bertolt Brecht, the most famous and radical playwright of the Weimar Republic. He performed in Brecht's play Man Equals Man and took on the role of Dr. Nakamura in the musical Happy End. It was in Berlin that Lorre met actress Celia Lovsky, who would become his first wife. In Berlin, Lorre also began his career in cinema. Director Fritz Lang cast him as a child murderer, Hans Bakert, in the 1931 film M. The film was reportedly inspired by the infamous Peter Kürten, known as the Vampire of Dusseldorf, a habitual criminal who maintained a polished appearance. He was well-dressed, well-read, and exhibited refined manners, making him an unlikely serial killer. However, he had a disturbing obsession with women and admitted to deriving intense sexual pleasure from killing his female victims, sometimes even singing during the acts. He rationalized his crimes as a form of revenge against a world he believed was rapidly declining. Fritz Lang envisioned Lorre for the role while writing the script for M and did not ask him to audition, as he was already convinced Lorre was the perfect choice. Lang described M as a simple cops and robbers story centered on a murderer on the loose, with neighbors suspecting one another. The public demanded action, but no clues about the killer emerged. The killer taunted, "Keep up your investigations. Everything will happen as I have predicted, but I haven't finished yet." However, M was more than just a crime story. It was one of the first films to explore the psychological aspects of crime, revealing the horror of a murderous mind. Lang had a strong vision and achieved it through determination and demanding performances from his actors. In a notable scene, Lorre's character needed to fall down a flight of stairs. Lang instructed him to throw himself down, and remarkably, it took only 12 takes, leaving Lorre with bruises that lasted for weeks. Lang also wanted the character to have a haunting whistle to the tune of "In the Hall of the Mountain King." But Lorre struggled to whistle. To resolve this, Lang recorded himself whistling the tune so that Lorre could lip-sync it. The filming was exhausting for Lorre. Like his character Beckert, he pushed himself to the limit. Paul Falkenberg, the film's editor who was on set almost every day, noted that Lang wrung him out like an old towel. Lorre was completely drained. He worked from 8:00 a.m. on court scenes until the next morning. At one point, he fainted, and Lang decided to include that shot in the film. By the end, Lorre felt as broken and isolated as Hans Beckert. Lang was thrilled with Lorre's performance in M, calling it one of the greatest in film history. After M, Lorre reportedly received 310 offers for similar roles, but he declined most to avoid being typecast as a psychopath. Unfortunately, he didn't always succeed in this effort. In the same year, he acted in 2 more films after his impressive debut in M, excluding a brief uncredited role in the 1929 silent film The Missing Wife, directed by Karl Leiter. His first film was Bombs on Monte Carlo, a German musical comedy from 1931, directed by Hans Schwarz, where he had a minor role. Later that summer, Lorre took on a unique role as a cheerful husband and father in The Luggage of Mr. O. This film revolves around a hoax in the town of Austin, where a set of luggage supposedly belonging to a millionaire with the initials O arrives, causing the town to go into a frenzy of rebuilding and rebranding without remembering why they started. During this period, Lorre remained active on the Berlin stage and appeared in many radio dramas. However, at the end of December 1931, he decided to leave the stage to focus on the growing fields of film and radio. In 1932, Lorre made 4 minor appearances, including 2 as a hunchback in Der Weiße Damen and Stupefiance. He also played a car thief in 5 from the Jazz Band and took on another dark role in the crime film A Shot at Dawn, directed by Alfred Zeisler. He acted alongside Hans Albers in the science fiction film FP1, which is based on Kurt Siodmak's novel. The film follows a brave pilot who prevents the destruction of a vital refueling station for transoceanic flights on an artificial island in the mid-Atlantic. To provide comic relief in this serious science fiction drama, they added a character of a newspaper photographer, which Lorre played. The role was tailored to highlight his strengths as the smallest actor in Berlin, and Lorre was excited to portray a character that showcased his sense of humor rather than being typecast as a child killer. When the Nazis came to power in Germany in 1933, the atmosphere in Berlin became increasingly dangerous for Lorre, a Jewish man. Ironically, it was reported that Joseph Goebbels, a high-ranking Nazi official, urged Lorre to leave Germany. However, Lorre had a different version of the story, claiming that Goebbels, who admired him, invited him to return to Berlin with promises of safety. Lorre responded by writing, "For 2 murderers like Hitler and me, there's not enough room in Germany." Lorre moved to Vienna, which was even more unstable than Berlin. Seeking safety, he found a rundown hotel in Czechoslovakia. However, it quickly became apparent that the Germans were planning to invade Czechoslovakia. Aware of the looming threat, Lorre, who spoke French, decided to flee to Paris. Although he was already well known there, he ended up in a cramped, dirty room on Rue de Saigon, sharing space with other refugees while waiting for a work permit. Meanwhile, M was still being performed in Parisian theaters, and audiences would call out Le Maudit, the film's French title. Among his fellow exiles were prominent figures like Billy Wilder and Franz Waxman. In Paris, Lorre struggled to find work and financial stability, and his morphine addiction worsened due to its availability. He sought treatment for his addiction and later admitted to feeling depressed, ill, and hungry throughout his year in the city. However, a promising opportunity was on the horizon. In 1934, Lorre caught the attention of Ivor Montagu, the associate producer of The Man Who Knew Too Much. Montagu reminded the film's director, Alfred Hitchcock, of Lorre's captivating performance in Me. Hitchcock instructed Montagu to bring Lorre to London immediately to assess his English skills. Lorre met Hitchcock and Montagu at the Hotel Mayfair in Berkeley Square, London. He listened carefully as Hitchcock shared his plans, trying to gauge the director's first impressions. "At that time, all I knew in English was yes and no," Lorre recalled. I couldn't say no because I'd have to explain, so I said yes to everything, which isn't really me. Hitchcock enjoyed storytelling, so Lorre paid close attention. Whenever he thought a story was ending, he would laugh heartily, which led Hitchcock to mistakenly believe Lorre spoke English well, ultimately securing him a role. Initially, they considered casting him as the assassin in the film, but they later sought to give him a more significant part. Despite his limited English, Lorre learned much of his dialogue phonetically for The Man Who Knew Too Much, which had a modest budget of $40,000. The film was praised by audiences and critics as an excellent thriller and a technical achievement. Lorre's performance was particularly noted, described as a masterclass in staccato violence. James Shelley Hamilton from Britain's National Board of Review remarked on how the film's grimness and terror were enhanced by its understated style. The actors, including Lorre, were casual and unassertive, with Lorre's low voice and subtle smile adding to the sinister nature of his character. This performance caught the attention of Harry Cohn, who invited Hungarian-American to work with him, although Cohn was unclear about the specific roles he had in mind. During this time, Jewish refugees faced significant challenges in gaining entry to the United States, making travel permits difficult to obtain. To facilitate this process, Lorre married his partner, Celia Lovsky, with whom he had been living for 5 years. After arriving in Hollywood, Lorre signed a contract with Columbia Pictures, though the studio struggled to find suitable roles for him. His first American film was Mad Love in 1935, where he delivered one of his most compelling performances, directed by fellow German immigrant Karl Freund. This horror film showcased Lorre's signature chilling style. In his role as Dr. Gogol, a disturbed surgeon, Lorre shaved his head. The plot revolves around Gogol performing surgery to replace a concert pianist's damaged hands with those of a convicted murderer who had been executed. Gogol becomes obsessed with the pianist's wife, an actress from a nearby Grand Guignol theater. To find out what happens next, you'll need to watch the film. The Hollywood Reporter praised Lorre's performance, stating, "Lorre triumphs superbly in a characterization that is sheer horror. There is perhaps no one who can be so repulsive and so utterly wicked. No one who can smile so disarmingly and still sneer. His face is his fortune." Mad Love became a sensation, establishing Lorre as a remarkable screen villain and earning him a dedicated cult following. Lorre later worked with Josef von Sternberg on an adaptation of Crime and Punishment, where he portrayed Raskolnikov, adding another murderer to his repertoire. Despite Lorre receiving praise again, the film itself was poorly received. Graham Greene commented that the original Russian story of a religious and unhappy mind had been turned into a lunch bar chromium version. Nevertheless, Columbia offered Lorre a 5-year contract worth $1,000 a week, which he declined. After his initial 2 American films, Lorre returned to England to star in Hitchcock's Secret Agent. Alongside his role in the film, Lorre sold Alfred Hitchcock the screen rights to Secret Agent. By 1944, he had built a valuable collection of story properties, estimated at $350,000. Although this savvy business move didn't solve his ongoing financial issues, in Secret Agent, Richard Ashenden, played by John Gielgud, struggles with his moral objections to sanctioned killing while trying to stop a German agent from gaining support in the Middle East during World War I. Ashenden feels no glory in his mission. Elsa, played by Madeleine Carroll, is assigned by British intelligence to act as Ashenden's wife, with Lorre's character, a professional assassin, assisting them. Tension filled the set. Gielgud was known for his highbrow Shakespearean style, while Lorre was dealing with morphine withdrawal, which negatively impacted his behavior. The two actors often clashed, and Gielgud disapproved of Lorre's unconventional methods. It was rumored that Hitchcock nicknamed Lorre the walking overcoat because he would rehearse in a long overcoat regardless of the season. After returning to the U.S., post-Secret Agent, Lorre accepted a 3-year contract with 20th Century Fox. One of his first projects was a lucrative role that became a huge success, but also a burden for Lorre. He starred in a series of films featuring Mr. Moto, a Japanese detective and spy created by John P. Marquand, from 1937 to 1939, reprising the role in 8 movies. Initially optimistic, Lorre soon grew frustrated with the films, calling the role childish, and he became dismissive when others mentioned them. However, he felt he couldn't walk away, as he needed the income to pay off his significant debts and cover expensive rehab visits in London while battling his morphine addiction. His situation worsened when he injured his shoulder during a stunt while filming Mr. Moto Takes a Vacation, the second-to-last film in the series, leading him back into a morphine spiral. Despite the international fame the Mr. Moto films brought him, Lorre was candid about his dislike for the character. In 1939, at a lunch for visiting Japanese officials, he wore a badge that read, "Boycott Japanese Goods." The rising anti-Japanese sentiment and the impending war eventually put an end to any further Mr. Moto films, which Lorre welcomed as a relief. Later, in 1938, Universal Pictures expressed interest in borrowing Lorre from Fox for the lead role in Son of Frankenstein, which ultimately went to Basil Rathbone. The film featured Boris Karloff as Frankenstein's monster and Bela Lugosi as Igor. Lorre declined the opportunity, tired of horror roles and seeking a new challenge. However, he found it difficult to escape typecasting. In 1937, he had successfully auditioned for the role of Quasimodo in a cancelled MGM adaptation of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. According to a publicist at Fox, this was one of the 2 roles Lorre most desired, the other being Napoleon. After a brief stint as a freelancer, he signed on for 2 films at RKO in May 1940. In the first film, Stranger on the Third Floor, he played the lead role in what is regarded as one of the earliest examples of film noir. The second film, You'll Find Out, was a musical comedy mystery featuring bandleader Kay Kaiser. In this film, Lorre humorously played against his sinister image alongside horror legends Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. Although both films have gained a cult following over the years, they were not well received at the time. Nonetheless, Lorre and Lugosi formed a friendship that thrilled horror fans, as they both shared a dark sense of humor. Years later, in 1956, Lorre attended Lugosi's funeral with another horror icon, Vincent Price. Price recounted that when they saw Lugosi's body in his famous Dracula cape, Lorre joked, "Do you think we should drive a stake through his heart just in case?" Director John Huston significantly helped revive Lorre's career by casting him in The Maltese Falcon in 1941, the same year he became a naturalized American citizen. Although Warner Brothers was largely indifferent to Lorre, Huston wanted him to play the character Joel Cairo. Huston recognized that Lorre embodied a unique blend of intelligence, innocence, and sophistication. Lorre often had a knack for saying one thing while thinking another. Censor Joseph Breen objected to Lorre's portrayal of the pansy Joel Cairo and demanded cuts of scenes where he cuddled the character Wilmer and stroked his face. Breen was satisfied that these edits removed any potential homosexual implications. However, he overlooked the significance of Cairo's CIA-themed calling card and his habit of brushing the phallic handle of his umbrella across his lips, both of which remained in the film and contributed to Cairo's unforgettable character. The Maltese Falcon premiered in New York City on October 3, 1941, quickly becoming a hit and one of Hollywood's most iconic films. It was later among the first 25 films selected by the Library of Congress for inclusion in the National Film Registry for its cultural, historical, or aesthetic significance. This film marked the peak of Lorre's acting career in America, and his portrayal of Joel Cairo became legendary. In 1962, Lorre reflected on the stock company he was now part of, which included Humphrey Bogart, Sidney Greenstreet, and Claude Rains. He was particularly close to Bogart, especially after Bogart discovered Lorre's impressive drinking skills. It is often said that Lorre encouraged Bogart to marry Lauren Bacall despite his concerns about their age difference, telling him, "5 good years are better than none." While the film department at Warner Brothers was uncertain about Lorre, the animation team was more enthusiastic. Lorre became a favorite character among Warner Brothers cartoonists, appearing in Looney Tunes and as a fish in Horton Hatches the Egg. He also inspired the original illustrations of Gomez Addams in The Addams Family, published in The New Yorker in 1938. Lorre worked with Warner Brothers on a project-by-project basis until 1943, when he signed a 5-year renewable contract that lasted until 1946. Despite this, Lorre rarely received top billing in his films with Warner Brothers. He believed this lack of recognition was not due to his talent, but rather because Jack L. Warner, the studio head, disliked him, possibly due to Lorre's constant antics. Lorre had a playful side off-screen and enjoyed playing pranks on friends and colleagues. On the set of the Maltese Falcon, he and Bogart pranked Jack L. Warner, which may have contributed to Warner's displeasure with Lorre. Knowing that Warner disliked seeing his actors smoke on screen, Lorre convinced his co-stars to fill the climactic scene with smoke and as many smoking items as they could find. When Warner saw the chaotic, smoke-filled scene, he was furious and forced them to reshoot it, incurring a significant expense for the studio. After the Maltese Falcon, Lorre returned to his usual roles as a villain in B-movies. He appeared in the comedic crime film All Through the Night and starred alongside Boris Karloff in the silly The Boogeyman Will Get You. Lorre played another antagonist, Baron Akito, a Japanese officer in Invisible Agent, a spin-off of the Invisible Man series. Despite receiving mediocre reviews, this film was a box office success. However, for Lorre, it felt like a downturn after the excitement of the Maltese Falcon. A significant opportunity was on the horizon. He would play Ugarte in Casablanca, a small but crucial role as a black market dealer who provides Rick, played by his friend Humphrey Bogart, with important letters of transit before being captured by the police. Even with limited screen time, Lorre's performance heightened the film's atmosphere of danger and shifting loyalties. Casablanca became one of the most quoted films in history, often misquoted. After Casablanca and the Maltese Falcon, Lorre and Sidney Greenstreet appeared together in 7 more films. This duo became known as Little Pete and Big Sid. Although they didn't always share much screen time, they became one of cinema's best-known odd couples. Many of their later films echoed the themes of Casablanca, including Background to Danger, featuring George Raft, and Passage to Marseille, where they reunited with Humphrey Bogart and Claude Rains. A standout film, The Mask of Demetrios from 1944, is primarily a noir thriller that reflects the styles of Alfred Hitchcock and Orson Welles. Notably, it is one of the few films where Lorre plays the lead without being cast as a villain. He rose to the occasion alongside a talented cast, including Faye Emerson, Zachary Scott, and Sidney Greenstreet. The Mask of Demetrios follows a writer on vacation who becomes obsessed with the rise to power of a recently deceased criminal mastermind after viewing his body and the mysterious circumstances surrounding his death. It is an undervalued gem of classic film noir. Their final collaboration was in the suspense thriller The Verdict, which marked the first feature directed by Don Siegel. In this film, Greenstreet and Lorre were finally credited as first and second leads, respectively. Lorre continued to work in similar roles for the next couple of years with films like The Conspirators, featuring Hedy Lamarr and Paul Henreid, Hollywood Canteen and Three Strangers, a suspenseful story about 3 people who share a winning lottery ticket. Lorre was cast against type as the romantic lead by director John Negulesco, sharing the screen with Geraldine Fitzgerald. Before these films, Lorre returned to comedy as Dr. Einstein in Frank Capra's adaptation of Arsenic and Old Lace, starring Cary Grant and Raymond Massey. The story follows Mortimer Brewster, played by Grant, a successful writer who discovers on his wedding day that his 2 beloved aunts, who raised him, are actually serial killers who poison their victims. Lorre's character, Dr. Herman Einstein, is a plastic surgeon who collaborates with Mortimer's brother and has his own sinister plans. Lorre's final film for Warner Brothers was The Beast with 5 Fingers, where he played the eccentric and troubled Hilary Cummins, showcasing his famously expressive eyes. By this time, Lorre was fully immersed in Hollywood life, often socializing with his friend Bogart at popular spots like Chasen's, Romanoff's, and the Velino. He frequented Finlandia baths to sweat out alcohol and seemed to have fully adapted to the high life. Lorre enjoyed a lavish lifestyle that exceeded his earnings and even borrowed money from Bogart, knowing he would never repay it. Lorre's romantic life was just as chaotic as his professional one, as he pursued a woman 14 years younger than himself. In the 6 years after the war, he acted in 15 films where he played a range of characters, including sinister villains, cunning foreign agents, a disillusioned scientist, a subservient detective writer, an explosive plastic surgeon, a thoughtful barfly, a famous artist, a murderous librarian, and occasionally a patriotic figure. It seemed he had found his niche in the industry, but beneath Hollywood's glamorous surface lay another side of Lorre's life. His extravagant lifestyle concealed a troubling reality that was as unbelievable as the roles he portrayed. His struggles included a morphine addiction, financial troubles, and a failing marriage, but the most pressing issue was the looming shadow of his past in Europe. Lorre believed that his friendship with Bertolt Brecht, who had been exiled in California since 1941, led studio head Jack Al Warner to label him a communist sympathizer. This accusation contributed to the end of his contract with Warner Brothers, as he was seen as a political enemy due to his association with the radical Brecht. Like many others, Lorre faced scrutiny from the House of Un-American Activities Committee. However, it was actually Brecht who was influenced by Lorre. Brecht had studied Lorre's acting style to shape his own theories, which would impact theater and film for decades. Their last public collaboration was the 1931 play Man is Man in Berlin, and they also planned several film projects together, including a 1945 adaptation called Lady Macbeth of the Yards, which aimed to modernize Shakespeare's work in the setting of the Chicago stockyards. The script featured surreal elements, such as a singing witch and nightmarish sequences, but the project was ultimately canceled by Warner's story editor. In May 1947, Warner appeared as a friendly witness during Lorre's testimony before the House of Un-American Activities Committee, although the friendliness of gray-listing an employee is questionable. Despite the seriousness of the situation, Lorre seemed unfazed. When questioned about suspicious individuals he had encountered in the U.S., he jokingly provided a list of everyone he had met. After his contract with Warner Brothers ended, Lorre's Hollywood acting career declined significantly, prompting him to focus on radio and stage performances, where his distinctive voice was a valuable asset. From the mid of the 1930s to the 1950s, Lorre made guest appearances on various comedy and variety shows. He starred in thrillers like Inner Sanctum Mysteries and Suspense, and hosted 3 radio series: Mystery in the Air, Nightmare, and Mystery Playhouse for the Armed Forces radio services. By this time, Lorre's personal life was in disarray. He and his wife Celia divorced in 1945. Remarkably, they remained on good terms, with Celia continuing to support Lorre as his publicist, manager, secretary, financial planner, nurse, and confidant throughout his career. While tabloids did not reveal the details of Lorre's personal life, those who paid attention could piece together what had happened. After spending time with the notorious womanizer Humphrey Bogart, Lorre married German actress Karin Verne, who was 14 years younger than him, shortly after his divorce. During this period, he returned to familiar territory with My Favorite Brunette, a comedic take on the detective genre, where he starred alongside Bob Hope and Dorothy Lamour. In this film, Lorre played a menacing henchman, although it was clear he was poking fun at himself. He also took a supporting role in the 1948 musical remake Casablanca, which was based on the 1938 film Algiers. While this role was not a standout moment in his career, it demonstrated his willingness to explore diverse characters, even if the quality of the films varied. In 1949, Lorre appeared in Rope of Sand, taking on a supporting role in a crime and deception story set in South Africa. Unfortunately, these roles did not help his financial situation, leading him to file for bankruptcy after a failed attempt to start his own production company. To make things worse, he divorced Verne that same year after just 4 years of marriage. During this challenging time, Lorre made his directorial debut with The Lost One, a deeply personal film that explored themes of guilt and redemption in post-war Germany, reflecting his own experiences and the trauma from the war. The film was released in 1951, and its translated title became a nickname for Lorre himself. The story is told through flashbacks featuring Dr. Roth, played by Lorre, a German scientist conducting secret research for the Nazi regime during World War II. After discovering that his fiancée has been leaking secrets to the Allies, he tragically murders her, and the German government covers up his crime. After the war, Roth works under an alias as a doctor for displaced persons. When he encounters a former Nazi officer who helped hide his crime, he is consumed by guilt over his wartime actions. Although The Lost One struggled to attract German viewers in the 1950s, who were eager to move on from the Nazi era, it has since gained recognition as a powerful and dark film. Sadly, it remained Lorre's only directorial project. During filming, Lorre used an unusual audition technique, asking actress Renate Manhart to wiggle her backside, and spending 3 days unsettling Lotte Rausch while staying in character. The film also introduced the chilling term Tötermacher, meaning deathmaker, to the German language. Lorre was known for coining new words, including the neologism creep, which he spelled with a K instead of a C, claiming it was the first use of the word to mean something uncanny or sinister. In February 1952, Lorre returned to the United States, where he resumed his career as a character actor in television and film, often humorously embracing his creepy persona. Shortly after moving back, he married Anne-Marie Brenning. Although she was not famous, she provided the stability and support he needed. The couple stayed together nearly until Lorre's death and had one daughter, Catherine. Catherine faced a difficult life after becoming an orphan at 17. She lost her husband in a motorcycle accident and passed away at 32 due to complications from diabetes. Before that, she experienced a shocking event that could have ended her life even sooner, but more on that later. As many movie trivia fans know, Lorre was the first actor to portray a James Bond villain as Le Chiffre in a 1954 television adaptation of Ian Fleming's novel Casino Royale. In this version, Barry Nelson played an American James Bond called Jimmy Bond. However, Lorre's death scene did not go as planned and turned into a comical disaster. According to screenwriter, Peter died on camera during a live broadcast, but the director failed to switch to the next scene. Instead of moving on, the cameras stayed on the dead Peter. Concluding his job was done, he got up and quietly left for his dressing room, smiling, leaving around 30 million viewers bewildered. In the next scene, he was shot dead again in an attempt to fix the situation. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, Lorre transitioned from film to television, taking on various roles, often portraying menacing characters in comedy specials. These appearances helped him connect with new audiences, although many of the projects were of low quality. While some questioned his choice to accept such work, Lorre needed the money. He expressed his disdain for the acting profession, stating, "An actor is the meanest, most contemptible sort of creature alive, so debased that he throws away his own self for money or maybe for fame." It seemed he was settling into life as a television star and family man, and the prospect of a major comeback didn't excite him. In 1954, when Fritz Lang offered him a role in Human Desire, he declined without hesitation, likely recalling the stress of working with Lang on M. However, that same year, Lorre starred with Kirk Douglas and James Mason in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which received critical acclaim and performed well at the box office. The film was particularly noted for its giant squid battle and Mason's impressive portrayal of Captain Nemo. It won 2 Academy Awards for art direction and special effects. L. Riley commented that the giant squid had taken on a role usually reserved for Lorre. Lorre also appeared in Beat the Devil, an adventure comedy directed by John Huston, featuring Humphrey Bogart and others. Huston intended the film as a loose parody of the Maltese Falcon. Truman Capote, the writer, explained that they aimed to treat the story as a spoof rather than a serious remake. Robert Morley, Lorre's co-star, remarked, "I have always thought him an intensely tiresome little chap. He has quite the best vocabulary I have ever had the misfortune to listen to." In 1957, Lorre found more enjoyment working on Silk Stockings, directed by Ruben Mamoulian, and starring Fred Astaire and Sid Charisse. The film received Golden Globe nominations for Best Film and Best Actress for Charisse. During filming, Lorre and his co-stars, Joseph Buloff and Jules Munchin, played a practical joke on Mamoulian. The director was known for reviving the careers of typecast actors and had cast the 53-year-old Lorre in a comic role for the remake of Nina. The trio spent 2 weeks preparing a humorous version of the song "Too Bad That We Can't Go Back to Moscow," which humorously referenced working for Mamoulian. They later presented Mamoulian with the film and a transcript of their prank lyrics. Lorre had always dreamed of portraying Napoleon, but the closest he got was taking promotional photos for a 1937 play that never reached rehearsal, along with a cancelled film project. This light-hearted period ended abruptly with the death of Lorre's close friend, Humphrey Bogart, in 1957. The loss made Lorre feel isolated and washed up in the industry, particularly as the studio system declined. The camaraderie that once thrived had diminished. Reflecting on these changes, Lorre noted, "I guess I'm one of the last of my group around." He expressed his frustration over losing both Bogart and Sidney Greenstreet, saying, "I was mad because they left me alone." Lorre felt like a relic of a bygone era that had initially embraced him, but had since shut its doors. He lamented, "The movies are no longer an industry. After all, who ever heard of an industry that offered no loyalty to its employees? The studios offer none at all anymore. Making movies used to be fun in the old days. It isn't any longer. It's a cold-hearted business." He described himself as just a working actor who, according to Hal Cantor, showed up, did his work, sometimes gave a little more, got his check, and went home. Lorre confessed, "I hate to call myself a star. I'd rather have other people call me a star." By this time, it was evident that his significant talents were being squandered on absurd roles in low-quality horror films or B-movies, leading to his growing frustration. Lorre occasionally voiced his dissatisfaction with the poor material he received. For instance, in a 1957 episode of Climax, writer Ellis St. Joseph, seeking approval, asked Lorre, "I'm grateful you accepted it. What did you think?" Lorre replied that he hadn't read the script and added, "When you're asked to jump into a barrel of, you don't ask if it's feet first or head first." Lorre did not experience a significant revival in his career. He had a minor role in the 1961 film Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. In his later years, he worked with Roger Corman on several low-budget films, including 2 from Corman's Edgar Allan Poe series, Tales of Terror, featuring Vincent Price and Basil Rathbone. In The Raven, he collaborated again with Price, as well as Boris Karloff and Jack Nicholson. Reports indicated that Lorre and Nicholson often had heated arguments on set, because Lorre frequently improvised his lines, while Price was more open to playful interactions with the script. They famously ad-libbed the film's opening line, where Price asks, "Shall I ever hold again that radiant maiden whom the angels call Lenore?" To which Lorre responds, "How the hell should I know? What am I, a fortune teller?" Lorre had struggled with severe gallbladder problems since the 1920s, which led to a long-term addiction to morphine. After eventually overcoming this addiction, he gained nearly 100 pounds, worsening his high blood pressure and changing his appearance. Despite his recovery, he occasionally relapsed, which took a toll on his health. While filming Scent of Mystery in 1960, Lorre collapsed on set. Fortunately, a medical convention was happening nearby, and a few doctors assisted him in his hotel room. They mistakenly believed he had only an hour to live after his collapse. As his condition worsened, one doctor suggested bloodletting as a treatment. They made an incision, and moments later, Lorre regained consciousness, revealing that he had only suffered from blood clots. By 1962, Lorre's third marriage to Anne ended in separation. His health continued to decline, and he appeared much older than his age. Lorre died on March 23, 1964 in Los Angeles, from a stroke at the age of 59. This occurred just 4 days after the release of his penultimate film, Muscle Beach Party, and on the day he was supposed to attend a divorce hearing with Anne. He was cremated, and his ashes were interred at Hollywood Forever Cemetery, where Vincent Price delivered the eulogy. Later that year, Lorre's final film, The Patsy, was released, providing a somewhat positive conclusion to his career. This film, one of Jerry Lewis's lesser-known projects, featured Lewis as the star, director, and co-writer. The Patsy is a light-hearted comedy with a small but memorable role for Lorre. In a surprising twist, Lorre's daughter made headlines when serial killer Kenneth Bianchi confessed that he and his cousin Angelo Buono had tried to abduct her in 1977 while pretending to be undercover officers. They released her upon realizing she was Peter Lorre's daughter. It was only after the arrest that Catherine grasped the terrifying implications of that encounter. Lorre's death did not stop the strange events surrounding him. In 1963, actor Eugene Weingand attempted to change his name to Peter Lorre to exploit his resemblance to the actor, but the courts denied his request. After Lorre's death, Gund began calling himself Peter Lorre Jr. and claimed to be Lorre's son. He not only resembled Lorre, but also had a similar voice, although he was in better physical condition. This led to a few small acting roles, including an uncredited appearance as a cab driver in Alfred Hitchcock's Torn Curtain in 1966. Due to the odd behavior of this doppelganger, Lorre seemed unable to escape the eerie and unsettling even after his death. Lorre had a unique ability to captivate audiences, using his unusual appearance and expressive eyes to convey complex thoughts and emotions, tapping into a deep fascination with human horror, particularly evident in his role in M. He was very aware of how others viewed him, famously stating, "I've played mostly bad men, killers, but the audience loves me. You know I can get away with murder."